Hello world and all who inhabit it, my name is Jessica, my pronouns are she, her, and today I am going to explain to you how a deck profile I simply named Head Empty No Thoughts came in second in an online Yu-Gi-Oh tournament. For first-time viewers, I will briefly explain Junior Journey and then I'll do a card-by-card deck profile. If you're a repeat viewer, just want to skip to the duels, check the timeline, and you will find the timestamp you're looking for. And before you leave, consider leaving a like and pressing subscribe if you like my Yu-Gi-Oh content or want to make me personally happy. So, the format. We are playing by Junior Journey rules. The Junior Journey format is an alternate Yu-Gi-Oh format based on the YouTube series Junior Journey created by MBT and RJ. The Junior format rules are as follows. High-level monsters don't require tributes. So, regular Yu-Gi-Oh! Tribute 2 monsters for a Blue Eyes, Junior Journey, you can just summon it. 1 spell activation per turn, 1 trap activation per turn, 1 set spell or trap per turn. Quick play isn't a thing. Quick play spells are treated as normal spells. There's other stuff, but hopefully you'll pick up more of it along the way, and if you're still confused or interested in participating in the Junior Journey format, there's a link in the description to a Junior Journey helper created by Discord user Lyric. Seriously, it's very helpful and regularly updated. So that's the format, but is there a ban list? Oh yeah, there's a ban list. One of the interesting things about this rule set is how cards that were useless in the TCG can single-handedly break the format here. That being said, the following cards were banned for this tournament. Blackluster Soldier, Envoy of the Beginning, Chaos Emperor Dragon, Envoy of the End, Cyber Jar, Dark Dust Spirit, Dark Magician of Chaos, Hinokagu Suchi, Magical Scientist, Morphing Jar number 2, Yamada Dragon, Yatagarasu, Giant Trune, Graceful Charity, Harpy's Feather Duster, Painful Choice, Raigeki, Snatch Steal, Heavy Storm, Cold Wave, Anti-Spell Fragrance, Imperial Order, Magic Cylinder, Solemn Judgment, and the following cards are limited to 1 copy each. Sinister Serpent, Spear Cretin, Barrel Dragon, Blowback Dragon, Chaos Sorcerer, The Creator, Witch of the Black Forest, Dark Hole, Swords of Revealing Light, Monster Reborn, Nobleman of Crossout, Level Limit Area B, Call of the Haunted, Dust Tornado, Mirror Force, Last Turn, Torrential Tribute, Skill Drain, and the following cards are limited to 2 copies per deck. Sangan. Now, this was and is not an official Junior Journey series ban list. This was a ban list proposed by the Discord when it became clear that coin flip dragons were way too powerful. The goal was in part to limit coin dragon spam and also to hopefully encourage deck profiles that weren't just big assholes with big attack hit opponent directly. Unfortunately, in that regard, the ban list failed. If anything, this tournament was more defined by big assholes than the official ban list. Hence, this deck. This deck sucks. This deck is an asshole, but this deck wins games. Every single monster is a huge asshole your opponent has to spend resources dealing with. Every spell and trap is designed to drain or match your opponent's resources. If anything, I used less thought creating this deck than second coin flip. I created this deck 2 hours before the tournament. Let's do the card by card. We have 3 copies of Blue Eyes White Dragon. Easy. Summon big asshole. Attack with big asshole. Blue Eyes White Dragon remains the strongest attack of any monster you can normal summon in the format that doesn't have some kind of downside. You can use stuff like Andro Sphinx or Ultimate Obedient Fiend, but they both have things that make it hard to attack with them. And speaking of the Sphinxes, we have 3 copies of Sphinx Teleia. This card was a promo card, I believe, for the really bad Yu-Gi-Oh movie from 2004. But in this format, Sphinx Teleia has 3,000 defense, which nothing can attack over. And in addition, whenever your opponent does attack into Sphinx Teleia, you then don't have to deal with the summoning sickness. So now you just have a Sphinx Teleia in defense mode until you get your board ready to attack. We have 3 copies of Thunder Dragon. Very good card, but this will also be my downfall. Just watch. The Creator is a very powerful card in this format. Discard a card from your hand to summon a monster from your graveyard. Never saw a play in TCG because you have to tribute monsters to summon it, but in this format, it has a 3k booty, which makes it really hard to deal with. Speaking of 3k booties, we've got Despair from the Dark. My favorite thing about this card is that it makes Delinquent Duo a rough choice some of the time. We've got Invader of Darkness at 3. Its effect is essentially useless because quick play spells are treated as normal spells in this format as far as effects go, but it has 2900 attack and it's a dark attribute, which will be important in a minute. We've got one copy of Barrel Dragon, one copy of Blowback Dragon. These cards destroy a card your opponent controls 50% of the time and have a really big body, even if those effects do not go off. They were way too powerful at 3 copies. At 1 copy, they're still going to help us in these games. We've got 1 copy of Jinzo. Jinzo's interesting in this format. It shuts down trap cards, but then your opponent can just summon Blue Eyes and attack it. We've got 1 copy of Breaker the Magical Warrior. I decided to use this card for this tournament because Heavy Storm was banned. Previously, my strategy had just been big attack monsters, Heavy Storm everything, can't stop big attack monsters. Without Heavy Storm, we have to resort to other stuff for spell trap removal, and it's a dark monster, so that leads into our Chaos Sorcerer. Chaos Sorcerer cannot be normal summoned from the hand, which makes it a little bit risky some of the time. However, it can be special summoned if you have a light and a dark monster in your graveyard to banish, and a special summon is better than a normal summon because you can special summon as much as you want in a turn. You only get 1 normal summon, and then Chaos Sorcerer also can banish just any monster your opponent controls. It's really powerful if you summon it. It can be really excruciating if you can't. And we've got 1 Kuriboh. This was partially a joke. Partially also, I figured that big assholes were going to dominate this tournament. And you would be surprised about how many situations you're sitting on a dark hole for the crackback, and your opponent goes in for lethal, and you're just like, wow, if I had 1 Kuriboh, I could do some very fun things next turn. 2 copies of Mystical Space Typhoon. Destroy 1 spell or trap card on the field. No longer quick play, but still very important, especially without Heavy Storm in the format anymore. We've got 2 copies of Smashing Ground, generically destroying face-up monsters. 1 copy of Monster Reborn, limited to 1 copy now, which is probably the right choice. 1 copy of Darkhold to clear the board. 2 copies of Pot of Greed in this card's final hurrah after this tournament, and after the ban list before this tournament, Pot of Greed is out. So, goodbye. 1 copy of Change of Heart, which is an interesting card in this format. There are a lot of spell cards that, in the TCG, were very easy to break because you can activate as many spell cards in a turn as you want. Change of Heart is the only spell card you can activate if you use it, and it doesn't necessarily take your opponent's monster off the board. So there are situations where it's not the right choice. However, you're still stealing your opponent's monster, and this is still a game-endingly powerful card. 1 copy of Nobleman of Crossout, limited to 1 copy. I think that is the correct choice. Unfortunately, this was limited in this tournament, is not limited in the new Junior Journey ban list. Nobleman of Crossout just punishes people who play defense position monsters. We've got 3 copies of Raigeki Break, the main strategy being to use this with Thunder Dragon, or use Raigeki Break to get a light or a dark monster into the graveyard. 2 copies of Bottomless Trap Hole to banish opponents' monsters when they're summoned. 1 copy of Blast with Chain, which actually matters a lot in duels that are Big Bungus versus Big Bungus, because I can attack my Blue Eyes into my opponent's Blue Eyes, flip Blast with Chain, and now my opponent's Blue Eyes loses, and mine is the strongest monster on the field. And it has a nifty effect if your opponent happens to MST it and they have a card on the field. We've got one Dust Tornado, very nifty to be able to pop an opponent's back row whenever you want, and the being able to set an additional card in a turn is the cherry on top. And then we've got Mirror Force and Torrential Tribute as additional ways to wipe the board. In the side deck, we've got two Cosmo Queen, just a big-ass monster that's also a dark. We've got Guardian Angel Joan at 3 copies in the side deck. I struggle a bit with this one because 2800 is very strong, but there are also a lot of cards that are stronger than it, and if your opponent is playing like a true big bungus deck, they will probably be able to run over it very quickly. That was ultimately how I lost the last tournament. However, Guardian Angel Joan plus Blast with Chain is actually very good. One copy of Kaiser Glider pops an opponent's monster back to the hand whenever it's destroyed. Another copy of Jinzo in case my opponent is more trap heavy. One copy of Witch of the Black Forest. One copy of Mystical Space Typhoon. 2 copies of Dispel. Dispel is one of those cards that's better in this format than in the TCG, and it's very good against stall-heavy decks. We've got 2 copies of Tribute to the Dune for more generic removal that costs a little more, and 2 additional copies of Blast with Chain. And that is the deck. Let's go ahead and see how I did with it in this tournament. So here we have our first duel of the tournament. And so basically last tournament I dealt with an OTK deck that was better than I expected, and this tournament I dealt with an OTK deck that was better than expected. So we'll go ahead and get past rock, paper, scissors. My opponent starts off with a Pot of Greed and a Sorry for this, which I don't feel they need to be sorry for because I have one of my own Pot of Greeds. Which I of course go ahead and activate right off the bat, drawing 2 more cards. I decided to go with a pretty simple play, setting Despair from the Dark, setting Blast with Chain. Blast with Chain probably isn't going to go off next turn. It's more if my opponent doesn't have any back row removal as insurance going forward. My opponent comes in with the Jackal. Unfortunately, I have Despair from the Dark to block it, which has a big, beefy 3k defense. Opponent sets 1 card, which I don't know yet is a Gravity Bind. They're both Gravity Binds. Oh, yeah. So I use Smashing Ground on the Jackal. I guess I could have gone more aggressive there, but I didn't know that my opponent was playing a stall-heavy deck. I was worried that the trap cards were going to punish me more for attacking than they actually did. And here my opponent does finally set a card that actually affects my board state rather than just freezing the game. So I switched Despair to attack, thinking that if it's a 3k defender, I can just use Blast with Chain. Turns out to be Mystic Tomato, which, I'm going to be honest, I don't respect at all in this tournament. My opponent goes ahead and gets a Saiyan, and I just leave it at that. I don't have any trap cards. My opponent, however, draws a good trap card. So they set that Witch. They don't set the Raigeki Break yet, which is interesting because this format does not have Heavy Storm or Giant Shroomade. I was pretty much down to set everything I needed the entirety of these games for that reason. I never feared a spell trap board wipe. I guess maybe my opponent doesn't want to discard Mystical Knight of Jackal. And in fairness, my opponent does have a whole lot of resources that I have to get through before I ever get to their life points. And here I destroy Witch of the Black Forest, and my opponent gets the first piece of their OTK combo, a Manticore of Darkness. My opponent goes ahead and draws a Reckless Greed for a turn. Now my opponent is setting the Raigeki Break because now they can get the Manticore of Darkness into the grave whenever it goes off. So here I set my Raigeki Break, and it's met with my opponent's Raigeki Break, which is actually kind of a shame because having a Raigeki break set on the field is dollar for dollar the single best thing you can do if you are dealing with an OTK deck. If you can just have a Raigeki break on hand to destroy an important combo piece, my opponent realizes that they've already used one trap card this turn, and I realize they're right, so my Despair from the Dark is not destroyed here. I take out that Sangan and get in with an Invader. My opponent gets a Mystic Tomato, which, like I said, I don't respect. My opponent draws a card. It's a pretty good one. It's Skill Drain. Talk about cards that are kind of having their last hurrah in this tournament. Skill Drain is indeed banned in the new Junior Journey ban list, so no more Skill Drain, and frankly, I'm fine with that. So here my opponent uses Skill Drain. This would probably have been a very good time to use Raigeki Break, although maybe I would have used it on the Gravity Bind. Here I tried a Change of Heart, the opponent's monster, in the hopes. I'm basically just like sitting on a bunch of cards that I can't do anything with right now. And I'm basically just like hoping that I can Change of Heart a powerful flip effect monster, maybe? That can get me going. But unfortunately, it's a Mystic Tomato, and if I didn't respect this card before, I definitely don't respect it now. So I can't do anything with that. I give my Mystic Tomato back to my opponent and end my turn. And here, we now see that they have the card of Safe Return now. So my opponent goes for Monster Reborn, I believe, to get Witch of the Black Forest. Yes, because they are almost set up with their combo. They just need that other Manticore. And hilariously, Skill Drain does not stop Witch of the Black Forest's effect from going off, because it activates in the graveyard. So now my opponent has a card of Safe Return up on the board. Now the thing is, I do have spell and trap removal in this deck. I'm literally running a copy of Breaker the Magical Warrior in addition to the MSTs. I'm just not drawing anything or drawing enough of it. Although in reality, I probably did not have enough spell trap removal in this baseline deck to really deal with this level of stall and pausing the game. After this duel, I do ultimately side in a whole bunch of spell trap removal in addition to what I've got, and here I finally draw a Raigeki Break. The problem is my opponent is several turns ahead at this point, so I destroy one thing and they're just going to hit me with another thing. My opponent sets the Creator, and here I can discard my Thunder Dragons. For all the good it's going to do. I guess it thins my deck out a little bit. I'm kind of hoping maybe get me to my combo piece. I basically just pass it at this point. There's no hand size limit, and I have the Raigeki Break up on the field, but I'm kind of waiting for the other shoe to fall in regards to the combo. So here I draw something that's a little bit of a blessing. I draw myself a Jinzo. The problem, of course, is that Skill Drain is up on the field. So if I summon my Jinzo, it will be negated. So I decide to just summon a Blue Eyes White Dragon. I flip up Sphinx to Leia to get the summoning sickness over with quickly, and start to just build up my board now. At this moment, I'm thinking I can hopefully end the duel outright. So I go ahead and Raigeki Break, tossing a Thunder Dragon, taking out the Skill Drain. Now I can normal summon Jinzo, and I'm not afraid of dealing with any trap cards now. So I'm doing the math in my head, and oh, if I had waited before using that Smashing Ground, I would have been in a much better position. So I attack the Mystic Tomato, which is just an annoyance at this point, and my opponent doesn't even have any targets left in their deck. So at this moment, I attack in with Invader of Darkness, but it's the Creator, which none of my monsters can get past. I cannot activate Blast with Chain both because I have Jinzo and because I've already activated a trap card this turn. So I actually misplayed this turn, both in how I used my Jinzo with respect to how strong and how possibly important my back row was, and also with not waiting on the smashing ground. So my opponent gets a Pot of Greed off. Drawing 2 cards. We finally see an Exodia piece. And they get the Manticore of Darkness up. And attack Sphinx Telea just to destroy the Manticore of Darkness and set up the combo to win the game at end phase. So, Manticore of Darkness is not once per turn, and you can continually cycle 2 copies of them at the end of the turn and summon infinitely. Card of Safe Return draws 1 card each time you special summon a monster, and this opponent just keeps drawing until they get all the Exodia pieces. So, I do lose game 1. Emotional damage. Alright, game 2 begins, and I have sided in literally all of my spell and trap removal. The extra Jinzos in, fucking D-spells are in, all of my MSTs are in, and I am pretty determined to take this one. So my opponent starts off with a T-set, which is a fake trap and a mystic tomato. I'm able to start off by getting my Thunder Dragon off, which I feel good about because I'm controlling both a Tribute to the Doomed and a Raigeki break in my hand. In terms of monsters, though, all I've really got going for me is Blue Eyes White Dragon. I'm able to Nobleman of Crossout the Mystic Tomato, which I don't really care about. I don't respect the Mystic Tomato, but it's cool that I'm able to just get in for direct damage immediately. So I set Torrential Tribute and end it. Now my opponent has a Sangan set on the field. God, I should have boarded out of my fucking Mirror Force. What a terrible idea. So I go in for the attack, and my opponent has a Gravity Bind. I go ahead and set Raigeki Break and pass it on over. My opponent now has 2 fake traps, which are very specifically designed to keep me from being able to use my back row removal. Unfortunately, it doesn't work out very well for them here. I activate MST, they activate the first fake trap, but now that is their 1 trap card per turn, so they can't respond whenever I flip up my Raigeki Break, pitch a Thunder Dragon, and take out Gravity Bind. So here I go ahead and attack Sangan. Honestly, I probably should have just summoned Thunder Dragon and gotten in for direct damage. What the fuck was I afraid of? So I pass it on to my opponent. They get a fucking Mystic Tomato. I don't know why they wouldn't get a Witch at this point. My opponent sets a Mystic Tomato. Maybe like with the intention of stalling a little bit. Doesn't work out too well here. I'm able to use Tribute to the Doomed. And here we are in a very simplified board state, which I'm kind of fine with. A simplified board state favors me because my opponent needs all their combo pieces. So I don't feel afraid about anything, so I go ahead and just pass it over again. I draw the Barrel Dragon and I think decide to go for it. Yeah, I summon Barrel Dragon and target the monster for... in order to try to pop my opponent's face-down monster. Unfortunately, I get 2 tails and a heads, so it doesn't work that way. My opponent activates Gravity Bind, which allows them to save their Mystical Knight of Jackal. But now, of course, that means their Mystical Knight of Jackal cannot attack either. And even if they could attack, I have so much removal in my back row. Don't really want to use the Raigeki Break because Chaos Sorcerer is at this point a very useful card, because once Barrel Dragon goes to the graveyard, Chaos Sorcerer is live. Opponent passes it on over to me. I draw a Dust Tornado, which is lovely against this deck. So I go ahead and see if I can use Barrel Dragon to pop my opponent's monster, which I can do even if Gravity Bind is on the field, and I do get 2 heads and pop the Jackal. Not sure why I didn't set the Dust Tornado at this point. Maybe I was worried about, like, my opponent's back row being a Raigeki break and having them just immediately destroy it during the end phase. So now my opponent does set a Witch of the Black Forest. I set my Dust Tornado, and I decide not to attack yet. Oh wait, no I don't. Gravity Bind is still on the field. Never mind. I thought I was making a smart play, but no. So my opponent does have the Fake Trap in response to my Dust Tornado, which prevents it, but now their Gravity Bind is alone out there on the field. Fairly certain that I can clean it up this turn, and I want to make sure I do it right. I guess I don't. I don't know what the hell was the point of not cleaning up there. I could have Raigeki braked the Gravity Bind. Okay. So I start off with the MST to take out level limit area B. I summon Witch of the Black Forest and activate Torrential Tribute. What the fuck am I thinking here? All I needed to do was try to get off Barrel Dragon, and then the first turn that I do, pop the Gravity Bind and just summon all of my monsters. That was definitely a misplay on my part. So I summon... Oh my god. I want my fucking Jinzo again. Why did I get my Jinzo? I have 2 powerful cards in the back row. I am not playing this game well at all. That's so funny. My opponent has a fucking Mystical Knight of Jackal. They choose not to attack, which is a pretty good choice. I would have fucking Mirror Forced it. Speaking of Mirror Force, I go ahead and send the Jinzo, and here comes goddamn fucking Blowback Dragon to save my ass. I summon the Creator, summon Chaos Sorcerer by banishing, I'm assuming, a Thunder Dragon. Yep, I banish Barrel Dragon and Thunder Dragon. Use Chaos Sorcerer's effect to banish the monster. Use the Creator's effect to send Blowback to the graveyard and summon out Jinzo. Which means that with the Creator and Jinzo, I almost have lethal here. I am playing this game very suboptimally, though. I could have had it a couple turns back, and now my opponent will have the opportunity to go ahead and Pot of Greed into their combo, and they get the card of Safe Return. The problem, of course, is that they've already activated Pot of Greed this turn, they cannot activate another spell, and nothing they have is strong enough to stand up to my 3 monsters. So despite my mistakes, I do take Game 2. And now I begin Game 3 as I begin many of the games in this tournament. I discard a Thunder Dragon, get 2 Thunder Dragons from my deck, and then I go ahead and set the Creator, set Raigeki Break, leave it at that. I feel very good about this hand. I have an MST, I have a Breaker, the Magical Warrior. Now I'm able to start off by immediately getting rid of that face down card, which is a Cursed Seal of the Forbidden Spell. This would have been pretty nasty if it hit my MST or something like that. So I'm happy to get that off the board. And here is kind of a nifty little thing. The Creator only has 2300 attack, which isn't considered strong in this format. It does have a 3k booty. So I'm able to flip it up and have it be in defense mode because level limit area B is up, which would put it at the 3k booty and be able to use its effect, but unfortunately it ends up not mattering because my opponent has a Tribute to the Doomed. I decide to go ahead and MST the Torrential Tribute. I'll set Thunder Dragon and leave it at that, just with the intention of starting to get a little bit more board presence. Since I can see the Torrential in my opponent's graveyard, it's no longer scary to summon monsters face up. Summon Breaker, the Magical Warrior, it switched to defense mode, and I use its effect to pop that Mirror Force. Then I'm able to use Dispel to pop that level limit area B. I go ahead and attack into the Mystic Tomato. My opponent is able to get its effect off to summon another Mystic Tomato. My opponent gets the Skill Drain, but there's not a whole lot they can do with it at this point because I have a Blue Eyes in my hand, and that doesn't care about Skill Drain at all. and go ahead and take out the Mystic Tomato first with my Thunder Dragon. And then I wait for what my opponent grabs before I decide on attacking. It's another Mystic Tomato. And my opponent has the Witch of the Black Forest, which gets them to one of their combo pieces, and they also have a card of safe return hidden in their hand. So they're on their way to getting their combo pieces, they just have to survive long enough for that to happen. My opponent decides to wall up a little bit, activating Monster Reborn, targeting a Mystic Tomato, summoning it in defense. So I decide to not even bother this turn. I don't even want to deal with my opponent's recruiting, so I just don't attack. And here I believe we just lock the game up, because I'm able to normal summon Jinzo, prevent anything from happening with my opponent's back row. I don't know that that's a skill drain, so I actually was worried for nothing. But then I am able to activate Change of Heart, steal the Mystic Tomato, and then it's technically a misplay to attack with the Thunder Dragon first. I should have just attacked with the Mystic Tomato. However, it does not matter. I have enough damage on board to win the game here. And that is the match. And with that, we are in the semifinals. So we start off the game, I draw a couple of big assholes and a couple of removal cards, which is pretty much what this deck is going for. My opponent summons good old Skull Archfiend of Lightning, which has a pretty nifty effect to keep itself from getting destroyed by card effects. Unfortunately, I am just going to go for the Invader of Darkness attack. So down comes the Skull Archfiend of Lightning, and in addition, with my Mystical Space Typhoon, destroying the set Swords of Revealing Light, which I am pretty okay with getting rid of. My opponent plays Sangha of the Thunder, and ooh, they don't set anything, which leaves them wide open for me to, smashing their Sangha, summon a Blue Eyes White Dragon, and just attack in for a huge amount of damage right away. My opponent activates Monster Reborn to bring their Sangha of the Thunder back, try to give it another try. They also set a Dark Ruler Hades to increase their the barrier to their life points and set a compulsory evacuation device. I summon Blowback Dragon, decide to declare its effect. I'm thinking about what to target, and then my opponent just decides to compulse it and skip steps. So at this point, I figure I'm very ahead in every regard, so it is worth sacrificing my Invader of Darkness and some life points in order to set off Sangha's effect so that I can then destroy it with Blue Eyes White Dragon. Here my opponent gets a Barrel Dragon on the field, which would have the potential to swing the game significantly, but I have the Torrential Tribute. My opponent already knows I have a Blowback Dragon, so they just automatically concede because they don't have any more plays. My opponent starts off with Delinquent Duo, which I feel very, very smug about, because after they get rid of the Breaker, the Magical Warrior, I'm able to use Despair from the Dark's effect. By discarding it with the Delinquent Duo effect, I trigger itself to special summon itself in defense mode. However, my opponent does have a Blowback Dragon, and does successfully get 2 heads and take out Despair from the Dark, rendering its effect ultimately meaningless. My opponent sets a Bottomless and passes it back to me. Unfortunately, I have the MST and Blue Eyes White Dragon. Actually, I start off with Invader of Darkness, I guess to save my stronger resources for now. Here my opponent summons Sangha of the Thunder and sets a Torrential Tribute. I go ahead and pitch a Thunder Dragon for 2 more Thunder Dragons from my deck. So I activate Change of Heart to steal Sangha of the Thunder. And I'm specifically worrying about Torrential Tribute at this point, so I decide to just get in with direct damage with both of them and let them have Sangha back. So now my opponent is on very, very low life points. They set a End of Anubis and pass it back to me. I activate Monster Reborn to bring back my opponent's Blowback Dragon. This turn was a misplay as well. If I was worried about Torrential Tribute, I should have normal summoned Blue Eyes White Dragon in the hopes of triggering a Torrential Tribute, and then activated Monster Reborn possibly to win the game then. And unfortunately, I flip the coin 3 times and do not get 3 heads. So here I do normal summon Blue Eyes White Dragon to try to get in for more damage, and my opponent does get the Torrential Tribute off. And now I am down to nothing except for 2 Thunder Dragons. So my opponent also gets a Pot of Greed off the top. So it looks like a big swing. However, they summon Skull Archfiend of Lightning here. And the problem with this card is that you have to pay 500 life points every turn it's on the field, and my opponent is already down really low. So I draw the Creator, and I set it. My opponent pays 500 life points, activates Monster Reborn to bring back a Blue Eyes White Dragon. Now, this is interesting. If my opponent had actually gone for a Barrel Dragon, they would have had a 50% chance of winning this turn. However, they go with the End of Anubis and attack into the Creator and lose 500 life points and lose the duel that way. My opponent was playing as though my face down card was like a flip effect or a recruiter or something, but because it was a 3k booty, I win the match. What a weird-ass fucking format. And with that, we are in the finals of the tournament. And like any good finals, I start off with a fucking Kuriboh in my hand. My opponent starts very simple, swords and done. So I start off with a Pot of Greed here, and having sat on it, I don't actually think that was the right choice. I think I should have MST'd the swords and just summoned a Thunder Dragon and attacked directly. My opponent summons a Barrel Dragon and uses its effect to target Despair from the Dark. We've got a Heads. We've got a Tails. And we've got a Heads. See, this is exactly why I think I would have been better if I just normal summoned a Thunder Dragon. Like, yeah, go the fuck ahead. Use your fucking Barrel Dragon pop for my Thunder Dragon. But instead, we lose our strongest monster that we have right now. However, we do draw another strong monster in the form of Blue Eyes White Dragon. So we go ahead and clean up the Swords of Revealing Light, summon Blue Eyes White Dragon, and get in there. I set a Raigeki break and pass it on. Now, unfortunately, my opponent is the ultimate big brain deck builder and brought a Buster Blader to my Blue Eyes White Dragon party. My opponent normal summons Buster Blader. I don't want to deal with it at all, so I activate Raigeki Break, pitching one of my Thunder Dragons, but my opponent has Monster Reborn. So Buster Blader is back. This thing gains 500 attack for each dragon monster your opponent controls and in their graveyard. So it's now at 3,100 permanently, as long as Blue Eyes White Dragon is on the field or is about to be in the graveyard. Buster Blader gets in there and destroys my Blue Eyes, and I'm now not feeling great. The only thing I have to out that monster is Blowback Dragon, and that's only a 50-50. And this is one of those times where it may have been good to not play Kuriboh in this deck. I normal summon Blowback Dragon. I hope that the fates have some luck in their hearts for me. I start off with the Tails and another Tails. Oh, that is what happens when you play these cards, unfortunately. So I am now just sitting on my ass with a Blowback Dragon, And I still don't feel awful yet because I have a mirror force. However, I feel less good when my opponent opens their turn with Pot of Greed. And worst of all, when my opponent drops Jinzo. This is a killer combo that we have on the field. A 3100 attack monster and a Jinzo. My opponent goes ahead and sets the Blast with Chain. And here at least I am able to get an Invader of Darkness go ahead and attack into that Jinzo. I feel a little better now that I'm able to use my trap cards. My opponent decides to attack in with Buster Blader. They probably could have won the duel this turn if they had summoned the Creator in attack mode and gone for the Jinzo. However, they did not know that I didn't have a Torrential Tribute at the time. They go ahead and pop the Bottomless Trap Hole, which I feel pretty good retroactively that I got the Bottomless, not the Blast with Chain. Oh wait, my opponent actually would not have been able to chain the Blast with Chain anyway, because it can only target their own monsters. Now my opponent summons Blowback Dragon, targeting my face-down Sphinx Talea. Thankfully my opponent gets heads. Tails. My opponent is able to use the Creator to pitch a Sangha of the Thunder in order to bring back Buster Blader, which still has 3100 attack because that Blue Eyes is still in the graveyard. God, I would love to draw a Chaos Sorcerer now. My opponent is able to smash Invader of Darkness. I don't take much life points, but I also don't have much life points left. So I'm able to draw a Smashing Ground here, but I have a big problem in that I cannot deal with the Blowback Dragon. Nothing that I have can destroy Blowback Dragon this turn. Additionally, my opponent draws a Nobleman of Crossout. They're going to start off with a Blowback, though, targeting my beefier monster. Get a heads, a tails, and a heads to pop the Sphinx Talea, and this is just game. This may be the single least surprising sentence in the human language, but the Kuriboh was not helpful there. Now we move on to the second game of the finals. My opponent starts by setting a Witch of the Black Forest and a Torrential Tribute, and I'm able to start off with my Thunder Dragon once again. I'm worried that the back row is a Bottomless or a Torrential, so I just do the safe play of set Sphinx Talea and set Bottomless Trap Hole. I decide not to Bottomless the Blue Eyes because I know that it cannot get past Sphinx Talea. However, what does take care of the Sphinx Talea in main phase 2 is Smashing Ground. Opponent goes ahead and sets a Blast with Chain. I activate my own Smashing Ground to take out Blue Eyes White Dragon. I set the Creator and I leave it at that. My opponent summons Sangha of the Thunder, and I just go ahead and Bottomless that immediately. Here I draw a Chaos Sorcerer for turn, which prompts me to go ahead and summon that Invader of Darkness to the field, so that I have a dark monster in rotation. I take out Witch of the Black Forest. My opponent probably grabs a Blowback here, I think. Yes, Blowback Dragon. So I just decide to leave it at that, big attacker and big defender. So out comes Despair from the Dark, and my opponent chains a Blast with Chain to bring Despair from the Dark's attack all the way up to 3,300. It takes out my Invader of Darkness, I take some life points, and now it's the strongest monster on the field, but not for too much longer. And here I decide to leave it. I'm still worried about the back row, so I don't summon anything else yet. My opponent summons a Blue Eyes White Dragon and takes out the Chaos Sorcerer. Now I draw my own copy of Blowback Dragon. I decide to just set Sphinx Talea for now, though. My opponent summons Blowback Dragon and targets the creator. I was really hoping they would go for Sphinx. And then I was really hoping they would miss, but they do not. They take out the creator. Blue Eyes attacks into this face-down monster, but once again cannot get past it because it's Sphinx Talea. So my opponent passes it on to me. I draw a Blast with Chain for turn. I switch Sphinx Talea to attack mode and attack Blowback Dragon in case that back row is Mirror Force. Then I summon Blowback Dragon. My opponent thinks about it, decides not to torrential the board, which they may come to regret as I activate Blowback Dragon and successfully roll the dice as heads. Flip the coin as heads 2 times. So I'm able to blow up Blue Eyes White Dragon and set my Blast with Chain. And now here's the funny thing about Buster Blader. I cited out of all of my copies of Blue Eyes White Dragon when I realized my opponent was running this. So at this point it's just a 2600 attack monster, and that means I'm able to activate Blast with Chain to equip to Blowback Dragon, and Buster Blade falls. So I start off this turn, I activate Blowback Dragon, targeting that back row that has been there, I think, pretty much this whole game. And I get the lucky coin toss. I finally take out that Torrential Tribute, which frees me up to summon Invader of Darkness, and I win the game from this position. So that is 1 game for each of us, and this is the final game to determine who wins the tournament. And I drew 2 Thunder Dragon. Oh, it's so bad. Oh god, it hurts so much. This happens sometimes, and it's hard to avoid. If anything, maybe I should have sided out of Thunder Dragon for game 3 whenever I knew that my opponent would probably have me go first and I would therefore be playing less cards. But unfortunately, all I can do is set Sphinx Talea and set Raigeki Break, which isn't the worst play in the world. The problem is I have nothing. I have no backups because I don't have any dark monsters to try to send to the graveyard for Chaos Sorcerer. So my opponent attacks Sphinx Talea, once again blocks Blue Eyes White Dragon, but once again my opponent smashing grounds it in main 2. They set a bottomless trap hole and the bad luck just continues. I draw another Raigeki Break. Usually you only want to see 1 Raigeki Break in a couple of turns, or you want to have resolved Thunder Dragon's effect in the good way. So my opponent activates Pot of Greed here. So in addition to going first and having card advantage troubles with Thunder Dragon, now my opponent has Pot of Greed and is able to summon Jinzo. I am getting flattened here. I am able to activate Dark Hole here. Maybe I should have just left Thunder Dragon in the hand. My opponent summons Sangha of the Thunder, and I probably needed to commit to just like activating a Raigeki Break here. If I had committed to summoning Thunder Dragon, that's all I've got. So I summon Blowback Dragon, and my opponent immediately bottomlesses it. I may have been a little bit better off here if I had Raigeki Breaked that bottomless before it got the chance to resolve, but the problem that I ran into this entire game is that I just didn't have resources and I didn't have second plays. So I decided to activate Raigeki Break at the top of the main phase 1 so that I can destroy Sangha of the Thunder before my opponent gets a Jinzo on the field. But unfortunately it doesn't even matter because my opponent has the Monster Reborn, and with that I lose the match. Well, That was a very demoralizing final game. It definitely calls into question some elements of playing both Thunder Dragon and also Sphinx Talea, and also multiple copies of Raigeki Break, and also Chaos Sorcerer. The problem is that a lot of my the other cards in my deck were genuinely playable and would have helped me in the situation. All of these cards that I ended up drawing, however, are things that work better with other cards that I just wasn't drawing. So, ultimately, I lost this match, but I still took home second place in this tournament, which I am pretty solid with. And thank you all for watching.